Zunächst einmal möchte ich mich ganz herzlich bedanken.
First of all, let me express my thanks for the opportunity to address you this afternoon as representative of the association. My name is Petra Thomas. As was mentioned in Ms. Vele's introduction, I'm a chairman of the board of Reisen, that's the umbrella association for sustainable tourism in Germany. I'm an art historian, archaeologist by profession, so I'm a bit of a lateral entrant, if you like. My activity as chairman of the board is a voluntary activity, which I do in addition to my main profession. I also work for one of the members of the association, that's the organizer R&E erlebnis Reisen from Hamburg, where I'm responsible for product management and development, as well as for CSR management. But I'll come back to that in more detail in just a moment, because that's part and parcel of our membership of the Reisen Forum. The title of my presentation is We're Talking About the World. That's our slogan. On the one hand, we're talking about taking people around the world, showing the world, but also means that we have to assume responsibility for what goes on around the world. In other words, we have to make sensible use of the resources available in the world, and that's the fundamental idea of sustainable tourism. I think the one of you will know is that sustainability consists of three elements. Firstly, ecology. What immediately comes to our mind, we think about sustainability, biotourism, ecotourism. That's the element which involves a natural respect for nature. That's a fundamental principle. That during our journeys, we try to reduce the negative impact on the environment as far as possible. The second pillar of sustainability is the economy. So there are all sorts of economic aspects that play a role here. And there's justice that plays a role as well, that those who are involved in tourism should be able to profit from their activity. That's an important pillar for sustainable tourism, because only if money is earned on a sensible basis will you provide the basis to be able to support other people. And the third element of sustainability is that of social responsibility. Socially responsible travelling begins in the design of the trip in the first place, then it's put into practice by means of encountering with cultures on the spot. We try to handle in a responsible manner, in a fair and ethical manner. That much up front, but we may well not be that known as an association. So who are we? The Association Reisen was founded in 1989 by 12 small organisers. They are, for the most part, still members of the association. At the moment, we have 180 organisers, so there's considerable growth that's taken place over the course of the past 15 years. We have over 4,000 unusual trips that we offer worldwide, from Germany to Europe. We've got Barbara Fogger from Reisen, who we've got to know here, who offers journeys to Italy, and also long-distance journeys to other continents of the world, to Oceania, for instance, or to the Antarctic. Over 100,000 customers who place faith in our organisers. That is a good indication of our success. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, so we're planning a major event in November to commemorate that, but I don't want to preempt what needs to be said about that. As a joint activity, we have a catalogue for all members. This, if you like, is one of the platforms that we offer as associations, so that each organizer doesn't need to have its own marketing measures conducted, but can profit from joint activities. And over and above this, we offer as a means of dissemination an internet portal that is available for everybody in the form of a database, but also it's possible to communicate the philosophy, the underlying idea of our form of travel. Other projects for the sustainable form of tourism are travel exchanges and fairs in Stuttgart and Munich, Hamburg, and at the ITB in Berlin. We also offer cooperation as part of the work of the Umbrella Association, for instance, with the WWF as a nature conservation organization, and some of our members offer journeys to the project areas to support the work of the nature conservationists. Our basis has been formed from the outset by the catalogue of criteria. That may sound initially quite bureaucratic, and it is to a certain extent. It's quite unique in the German and European landscape, tourism landscape. It describes the economic ecological criteria that we have for our travel. It's a catalogue of practitioners for practitioners, a manual to understand how a journey of this kind should be conducted in order to guarantee the high standard of our travels. Every one of our members undertakes to adhere to the listed criteria. This has become an 8-page pamphlet in the meantime, where we describe in detail how trips should be organized from the very outset right up to the very end. What I want to do here is to enumerate some of the most important criteria from this catalogue and to look at them in detail. I'm going to begin with the ecological criteria of our journeys. One important aspect of organized travel is the size of the group. We try to keep the groups as small as possible in order to be able to conduct individual programs so that a region can be encountered together, but in an individual manner. What's important is that in sensitive areas such as national parks, just imagine you're going on a hike through a national park with a 50-strong group, then even the shyest of species, orang-utans and others, will not be pleased. So what we try to do is to adjust the size of the group to the area that we're traveling through. It's going to be larger during a city trip. If you're going through a conservation area, the groups will tend to be smaller. The maximum group size is around 20 people. Normally, we are around 12 to 15, depending on the organizer and the area visited. One important aspect of travel is, of course, the journey together. This is the part of the journey which has the strongest impact in ecological terms on the environment. We prefer to have ground-based transport, and we travel by train or by coach. We prefer slow journeys like wandering, cycling, canoe trips, but you cannot cope without having air flight, because depending where people want to go, there's no alternatives to air flight. So this is reserved for areas that are a long way away. There are no alternatives to getting there, which we think is viable, practicable. And then if people do fly, then they should stay as long as possible where they are, so that the flight and the flight emissions are commensurate. And then we also recommend to our guests, if they're going to fly somewhere, then they should compensate for the flights. In other words, the damage that they cause in the form of that personal carbon footprint should be compensated for in an appropriate manner. Well, it's quite clear to all of us that the weather can ruin a holiday, but climate can ruin a destination. That's a quote from Daniel Scott, chairperson of the EMO Commission on Climatology. So if you go somewhere, you should take that into account. Now, our organizers all support the climate protection initiative called Atmosphere. Most of you will be familiar with this. This is a charitable initiative which was launched here in Berlin, non-profit making initiative, and it is promoted by the Federal Ministry of Environment and is considered to be the most demanding initiative of its kind within the field of climate protection. Now, how does it actually work in practice? You want to compensate the flights that you undertake. I brought a little chart along with me. So for a flight from Frankfurt to Baghdad, Bangkok and zurück, we're talking about climate-relevant emissions of 2,000 tons of CO2 that emit in the atmosphere. So Atmosphere then works out how much emerged in terms of emissions. and has to be compensated elsewhere in the world in order to make sure that these flights are neutral in character. So the customers are informed and they are told of what the equivalent would be in euros. The customer pays voluntarily. We don't charge these fees because it's up to the person undertaking the trip, him or herself, to compensate for the personal carbon footprint. The money that is paid to Atmosphere is invested in projects in developing countries. It's very important for us. We have the highest standard of projects that are funded by Atmosphere. These are so-called CDM Gold standard. This guarantees that these projects, in addition to the existing climate initiatives, take place. This also guarantees that living conditions of the population are verifiably improved. The customer, having made the payment, receives a document which verifies the payment made, and this can be offset in tax terms. So you could do something good, document responsibility, and have a financial benefit yourself. Now, in order to put this in a proper relationship, the flight from Frankfurt to Baghdad is about 2 tons, and that is the climate-friendly budget of a person that is calculated as an annual budget. In other words, with a single journey of this kind, you've used up all of your annual budget. And the table also shows here that people who live in India have an average value of 1.5 tons per year. That's what they cause per year. In Germany, well above that, 11 tons per person per year. The Americans, of course this includes the whole of the economy, around 20 tons per person per year. So you can see what imbalance there is in this context in the world. Some consume a great deal of CO2 and elsewhere in the world. Savings are made. So you can see this quite well here. As a result of car driving, if you travel 12,000 kilometers per year, you produce 2 tons of emissions that occur in the world. Now, by way of comparison again, to show you that the choice of the means of transport is so crucial, coaches are often underestimated. If they are fully occupied, they produce the least amount of emissions. That increases via train and local transport, via private transport by car. We're talking about 100 kilometers, 14.4 kilograms. If that's extrapolated, it makes it quite clear that air flight causes the highest emissions. Overall, tourist flights causes 9% of global emissions of CO2. That's something that needs to be borne in mind if you work in the sphere of tourism. I'd like to deal with a number of other ecological criteria. In other words, the selection of accommodation in situ. We take great care to ensure that smaller owner-run facilities are chosen with a personal atmosphere, so you see something of what is typical about the country, and not just our accommodated international hotel chain. You don't know exactly what part of the country you're in or part of the world you're in. And what's important for us is that these facilities should be sparing in the use of resources. In other words, we choose facilities that use renewable sources of energy, solar-driven heating and electrical systems, for instance, run on biogas. That care is taken to avoid the occurrence of rubbish. Classical example in the tourist sector, unnecessary packaging should be done away with. You can see this as a traveller yourself. If you discover at your breakfast table that there are no pre-packaged facilities for marmalade or jam or whatever, that this is avoided so that there is sparing use made of water, packaging and local resources. A further opportunity consists in environmentally friendly products. Products are made of maize, starch, and so on. These are 100% recyclable. So these non-recyclable packaging is done away with to a large extent or averted entirely. The second aspect of our list of criteria has to do with economic criteria. What is the economic viability of these trips? It's important for us to work on the basis of partnership, have fair treatment of all our partners, take care to ensure that we reach agreements, agreed treatment on contracts, with ethic codices are to be taken into account, so the cooperation is put on the sound footing and everybody knows exactly what's to be expected of the activity and everybody profits. Another area is that the people who are visited are incorporated in the financial profit that is made. We make sure that the local communities are incorporated to a greater extent in the tourist activities and play an active part in the touristic development of the countries concerned. We do this on community-based tourism, and we organize a very important legislation incorporated in the planning phase and are asked, A, whether they want to be visited, and B, what is to take place if the visitors come along, because it's by no means a matter of course. Some people don't want to receive unwanted visitors in their front garden just because they're interested in the geraniums. What is also important is that local produce should be focused on. A country lives off its tastes and smells. That's an important part of our travel experience, that we should prefer the use of local produce and typical culinary products. The use of regional products not only saves transport costs and therefore emissions, but also provides a local value added. The maintenance, for instance, of local facilities, companies, provides the sources of memory for the travelers. But love and also travel goes through the stomach. You take local products with you, you can smell the scent of your holiday when you open your olive oil when you get home. Another important area, which is also important for the economic aspect of travels, are the fair working conditions that prevail, not just for the local members and their employees, but also try to make care to ensure that the countries we visit, minimum standards are adhered to. They should also be able to profit from tourism. It's quite clear that tourism is very seasonally dependent, and therefore certain things are not possible or can only possible to earn money or keep things open throughout the whole of the year. We try to make sure that long-term employment applies in situ with fair conditions of employment and pay. I just reported this very briefly. The local population should be incorporated in the early stages of travel planning to make sure that everybody gets pleasure out of visits that are undertaken. The third sphere accompanies the social criteria of a journey. Here, it's important to us that we have a travel guide on board who is a mediator between the different cultures. We want the travel guide to have an explanation provided of local customs, to give visitors a feeling of what the local populations and habits are all about. It's very important if we go to travel conservation areas that should work together with rangers in national parks, for instance, to make sure that the traveller is given not just information, but what is the right way to behave in such areas. But here again, the size of the group is also important, as I indicated just a moment ago. A travel leader should be accompany 20 people, no more than that. And the smaller the number, the greater the amount of information conveyed. I know from my art historical studies that you only see what you know about, and therefore information for every member of the travel group is very important. Another important aspect is the culture of learning from one another. We try to have an intercultural exchange during the course of the journeys that we organize so that the travelers can get into contact with the host. We try to do this by means of project visits to homes, villages, so that you experience something of everyday life in the places where you go on holiday. Much more than you can get than by living in a hotel and just talking to the staff there, for instance. Since our foundation, we have supported initiatives to protect children against sexual abuse, but also economic abuse. There is an international movement which is called depot. It's called it's in Bangkok, whose members are called upon to sign this and to make this part and parcel of corporate policy. For us in Germany, the code is represented by an industry, by an organization in Freiburg. They train people about how they should communicate, and we provide them information. That's the most important part of what we do to make sure that if travelers do observe something about it on road that strikes them as being suspicious, they should know exactly how they should respond. I think it's a very good feeling of security for every traveler. Now, all the aspects that I've just referred to are part and parcel of human rights, the dignity of people that are affected by tourism. And it's very important that many people think that human rights have nothing to do with political human rights, that only governments have an influence, but as regards the area that we're responsible for, working conditions, the right to cultural independence and freedom, fair wages, child protection, these are all aspects of human rights that can be impaired by travellers. Here again, we have to be very careful in planning the journeys and make sure that these rights are taken account of. Now, I've given you all sorts of criteria that we apply. So how do we then actually put things into practice? How do we make sure that these criteria are adhered to? That was a long discussion that we had in the association from 1998 to 2008, because this catalogue of criteria was constantly extended. This is an ongoing process, all sorts of things that needed to be incorporated in the catalogue as a result of developments in individual countries. And in May 2008, at our annual general meeting, we had a unanimous vote with only one abstention, where I think is a tremendous step forward. We had an agreement that a CSR reporting procedure should be introduced, which is obligatory for all our members. This is not a voluntary arrangement at all. It's CSR reporting, which has a look at the companies, and every 3 years a report has to be written, which is standardized in form, where analysis is conducted of the company concerned. It's quite a considerable time outlay that's involved. All sorts of data have to be collated, but the service providers that are involved, travel guides, hotels that use, and so on and so forth, but also data on our companies in situ, how energy used, what's the level of customer satisfaction or not. This is all a very important part of a travel that is undertaken. The CSR seal of quality is unique. In the meantime, 70 of our organizers have been certified. 30 others are undergoing the process of certification. And our initial organizers outside the association that decided to subject themselves to certification. We're proud of this because we want to set a standard which applies not just to the members of our association, it's important to them, but is also accepted throughout the whole of the tourist sector. That's the message that we have. Tourism must be more sustainable, not just in the small area of niche organizers, special event organizations within our organizations, but no, that should apply to the whole of industry, including the many large organizations can reach out to people and change their attitudes. Now, what does all this mean for us? If we say we're going to have ourselves certified and we want to push sustainable tourism forward, this means going beyond statutory measures to assume ecological and economic responsibility and develop tourism along ecological lines, sustainable lines, which is what we need in Germany. Of course, we want to create transparency for the customers, because all these reports that are written are published so that every traveller can inform himself accordingly, or how the organiser approaches a certain issue, and the same chapter is incorporated in the report of the organiser, so that we have a transparent, openly verifiable procedure that as traveller you can follow up on this and inform yourself. So, summarising all this, we're not talking about individual projects or individual things being supported, like a forest in Mallorca. We want to anchor an attitude with a strategic direction, and which works towards a continuous process which leads to further optimization. And our objective is to maintain the local resources, to create jobs for local population, and to make sure that the social conditions of the hosts are improved in the longer term, so that we can secure a touristic future, have a tourism with future, because we don't want to destroy what we live from. Our recommendations to travellers are, to make things quite specific, what you can take home with you as a message: travel less often but longer, because if you're causing emissions, then one should take a conscious decision. If we're going just for 5 days, no point to travel to Bangkok. Therefore, the island of Rügen should be the right place to recuperate. The body will thank you for that. If you don't travel around the world in 5 days, you do away with inner German shuttle flights. You don't fly any less than 700 or 800 kilometers. Should non-stop flights be preferred, because you should choose those because by having a changeover, you cause more emissions. You need to invest in an initiative like atmosphere to make sure that existing emissions can be counterbalanced. Avoid rubbish. The best thing is to not take anything these countries of plastic, anything else that is not degradable. If you want to take something with you, then to take it back with you, because in many countries of this world it's not possible to process the rubbish or have it properly cycled. You don't want it just decaying on the streets. We need to make sure that the relevant information package is put together with respect to the travellers are going to be able to take. We want to promote the local economy. That's what we say to our travellers, to invest on the spot in small-scale projects and visits to craftsmen's sites so that local traditions can be maintained. And we are in favour of high quality, but not for excessive luxury. Nobody needs a golf resort in a region where basically there's not enough water in the desert. That's something that has to be taken into account. The facilities in situ should not be used unfairly. And for you as a traveller, this is a source of orientation. This certification that we offer, CSR Tourism is certified, and there are a number of other smaller seals, for the most part, in the hotel sector. But for organisers, this is the certificate that's available in Germany. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take them. Thank you.